Hello, how is everyone who is listening? This episode is part 2 of What Happened to You. It's a book by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. I will cover chapters 6 through 8 here, and actually 6 through 9 here, and number 10 next week. Last episode was part 1, and that was chapters 1 through 5, so go take a listen if you haven't yet, and go to the link in the notes to get on my email list, of course, because a few short paragraphs that I pack every week with powerful but really simple ways to get to the changes you need, to deepen your level of connection to those who matter most to you. And over time, these add up, you guys. These little paragraphs and little tidbits add up to big results. So go get on the email list now so you don't miss any more weeks of it. You can put them in a folder or whatever and refer to them. But the ones that stand out to you and really seem doable, those are the ones that you need to go do. And I promise you'll eventually have big results. You'll look back and be amazed at how far you've come and how much better things can be in your relationships. Just quite frankly, miracles that can happen. So a quick summary of part 1 of this book is, at least my own takeaway, is the importance of nurturing authentic connections. Trauma has altered us and how we have relationships. Real authentic relationships reverse the altered effects that we have gotten from the trauma. And all of us have trauma to varying degrees. Just simple neglect from someone we love. For example, just not being seen or heard by them and feeling isolated or forgotten in groups of people. It changes the brain and our responses to life situations that we have. On we go into chapter 6. Oprah and Dr. Perry, they talk about proving our reality. And they call this chapter From Coping to Healing. Our poor behaviors that once suited us don't serve us any longer. They got us through and they helped us cope with what was happening to us at the time. But they're now hurting us and working against us. And so it's time to let them go. The book reminds us that it was never about what was wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just all about what has happened to you. So if there's a belief that you have that people hurt you, then you have this automatic assumption that everyone you meet could possibly cause you harm. And it's just because you were hurt emotionally or physically at some point. Later in life, when you go to choose friends or a life companion, you're still carrying this belief, and that's when it doesn't serve you well. You will subconsciously choose those who can't be trusted and those who do cause you harm out of familiarity. Even though you say you want something different, you're programmed to want something you see as familiar. You wonder why people just like, oh, I just always pick the wrong guys, or I always get into these relationships. It's because it's familiar. Okay, so that helps us understand. Oprah said that humans have this innate desire in us, and we're all programmed to seek out proof that we matter. Like, I matter, I'm one of the tribe. That's how she said it. However you define mattering and belonging, because we all have different ways in which we see being loved. That's why it's so important for us to help others feel like they're important and they're worth our time, and we show them that they do belong. It's to fulfill this desire in them, and we set ourselves up with it too. Otherwise, we can all form unhealthy, attention-seeking, like maladaptive behaviors. And maladaptive meaning the ones that don't allow us to thrive in particular settings. Maladaptive also means behaviors that interfere with daily living. Some examples of this would be like a constant state of worry or anxiety, like impulsive actions and reactions, or the need for substance abuse and numbing and buffering. We must do whatever it takes to show the people in our lives that we love them in a way that sees past their immediate behavior, because every human is valuable and has a soul. Oprah talks about how we all have moments that we describe as like, I'm slowed down. This is when we perceive pain and suffering, like a car wreck's going to happen, or a car wreck did happen, and everything just slowed down. I remember it so vividly, or a bike crash, or someone physically abusing us. Our brain kind of floats, so we're not feeling it directly. It's like we're observing it happening to us and not actually feeling it. And I know I use this in my coaching courses. I teach people how to use this to their advantage by getting some space in between you and your unwanted emotions, like to be the observer of the emotion when it's happening. The emotions that we don't like having, and the ones that we would give anything to make stop, like pesky fear-based emotions. It can be a strength to know this skill of distancing yourself from it and observing it. This is where flow is also found. I know people say, oh, you've got to be in a state of like creativity and flow. It can be controllable, and it's very powerful when it's used with intention. And I teach and show this and how intention precedes action. And I teach you how to really use it in your life and relationships and family and personal goals and behaviors. And I think it's a really powerful, and it works every single time. But to get back to the book, Dr. Perry continues to talk about how if you have used disassociation repeatedly over your life, and this is the disassociation when your brain kind of floats, right? That you're unable to stay in the game. Like kids who just drift off and can't even pay attention in class, like they have a hard time focusing. Or when it's time to take a test, just like your brain goes out the window. I know there's some times that people are like, oh, I just get scared when it's test time, right? But people that are afraid to do a hard task and they just leave instead because they can't really regulate themselves in that scenario. So it's just basically not being able to handle what's in front of you. And all humans find ways to soothe and escape. Sometimes it's through self-harm. I know there are people who pick at scabs in order to just kind of focus their attention in on something that is not what's going on around them. They'll pull their eyelashes or eyebrows. There's people who just get upset and pull their hair out or hit themselves. Cutting is also quite common nowadays. And all of these release the body's dopamine. And some people find that it regulates them. They're so scared in the environment they're in that if they can do something that releases that dopamine in their body, they find that it soothes them, it regulates them, it pulls them out of their problem to focus on what's directly in front of them. Throwing up is one, bedwetting, like incontinence. There's all these kind of symptoms that Oprah and Dr. Perry pull out because they're in a dysregulated state, and those types of behaviors become a reward system for the underlying issues and beliefs and emotions. It grabs your brain attention and it pulls you somewhere else for something that is less stressful, something you're more in control of, and that gives you relief. I just thought this was so fascinating. I loved in this chapter how Oprah explained when she learned about intention. She said the outcome of any experience is dictated by the intention you have going in to the experience. She said when she learned this, it just changed her life, but it also saved her life because it taught her to say no. She admits being a people pleaser through and through, and that being a people pleaser came at the cost of losing herself. And she just loved how the outcome of any experience is dictated by the intention you have going into that experience. You know, if you have the intention to, I'm going to go fix the problem, I'm going to go try to repair this, that creates our experience. And I loved how she said that. The idea in this chapter kind of struck me like this, like our minds have become conditioned over the years with repetition, right? And patterning, and which I've talked about in my podcast before, but what we love most is what is most familiar to us. So if you're raised in chaos, you'll create it when it's not there. If you never knew unconditional love, you know, you'll love the way that has been shown you. Sometimes the way you love will just have an endless list of rules. Like you do this and you don't do this. If you love me, you do this. And if you and you won't do this. But sometimes love looks like punishment, which is really crazy, but it happens. Like if you're used to being punished, then you'll find someone that punishes you and has a lot of rules for you. Or when you love your children, it will appear as punishment, which that can be self-inflicted too. I know there's a lot of people out there that just keep punching themselves in the face with all their mean words in their heads all day. They're speaking to you poorly as punishment. Humans are just looking for something predictable in their world. They're proving their reality true. They're proving what they really believe, those beliefs we have about ourselves, they're proving them true. So a lot of times stability and nurturing feels like disorder. to someone who is used to chaos. Mind work, therapy, and coaching and counseling can build a new road next to that old one. So if stability and normalcy and peace feels like I don't know what to do, it's like too quiet, there should be something going on, and then you create a problem to soothe yourself and become more comfortable. All right, in chapter 7, it talks about post-traumatic wisdom. Children and adults can demonstrate resilience after stressful situations and adverse things happen. But if you look more carefully, Dr. Perry says that our biology, our expressed trauma in the brain, it changes. It changes everyone in some little way. He said that the baseline we're trying to get back to is connectedness. We heal through belonging. And I love that he says that so many times. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so we just don't ostracize another person, period. We don't ostracize family members or ourselves. We don't talk and think about, marginalizing, or I know it's a thing, but we try to get everybody back to being together, being wanted, being loved, and being needed. And the more harm done with excluding people and being against someone, the more solidified the pain and the trauma becomes. So Dr. Perry explains that the best indicators of trauma are the changes in the brain after certain events. Like sometimes it's an acute event that happens, like we witness something, and sometimes it's a cumulative trauma. Science finds functional changes, like changes in speech. Have you ever heard of a story where someone quit talking after an incident? Like for the longest time they didn't talk. Another one is impulsive behaviors, fine motor loss, depression, anxiousness, a hard time learning new things, or forgetting and having to relearn things, or not being able to maintain healthy relationships from then on. These are all just indicators of the changes that happen in the brain due to some sort of trauma. But he also assures the readers that belonging is the antidote to all of this. Being present with someone supportive and nurturing creates the environment of belonging, and that we can put in place some very controllable stressors to practice. Sports are a good one. Like it's very, controllable within a range of rules, and it's very structured. Music is one, study, acting. Those are all kind of moderate and very not threatening places to practice, and it's perfect for growth. And I would add here, if you pay close attention and you ask heaven for some help, you can observe their body language. Like someone who just has poor behavior and you think, oh, they have all these issues and they need to be fixed. Just observe their unique body language and their emotional cues, and you'll know when to push them into trying harder and when to ease up because you're making it worse, and when not to demand things. And this will lessen the effects of eroding their self-esteem more and pushing them deeper into proving their trauma and reinforcing their trauma. Oprah and Dr. Perry agree that failure in small doses is super important for this process as well. And you wouldn't think that, right? You wouldn't think we just need to have them fail a bunch of times. But when we fall and we get up and try again, and then we fall and get up and try again, all developmental success comes after failure. Many failures need to occur before mastery is achieved. And the key here to this is, right, we want to fail and we want to keep trying, then we fail and then keep trying, but they eventually have achievable challenges. It's more about the practice, right, than it is the achievement. But the people with the sensitized responses, they're overreactive and they're making a bigger deal than what this really little thing is. They act before they even think, because the lower brain gets a hold of the information before the higher brain does. The higher brain is not as active and it hasn't had as much practice, so they aren't used to making decisions. They're just used to reacting, which the lower primal brain is more dominant at that point because the higher brain isn't as active. With these people, you'll know it's because you'll know this is happening with people because it's super hard to have meaningful discussions or get through to their actual understanding. It's just impossible to reason with these people. It looks like someone who, do you know someone who interrupts you often, makes it about themselves, tells you how convinced they are or overly inflates how right they are and how they've always had it so much worse and they get through just fine, like an overly inflated ego. They don't allow others to speak fully. They're super offended at anything anyone else says. If they're told to calm down, they super escalate. Right? With anyone who's responding like this, just know words are not effective at all. They more feed off your tone and your body language. Like if they see disapproval or intolerance from you, they perceive the slightest bit of that as a threat and they attack back. They do that to survive and to keep the conversation within their control. I know teenagers are like this. Some people out listening may have moms who grew up with that were like this, or dads, or maybe you remember a grandparent being this way and having some of these things. Patience, outbursts, just threats. And it was all just for their survival because they didn't know how to respond in any other way because their lower brain was dominant. Really, their decision-making brain wasn't as active or in as much practice. So it's just about like not what's wrong with them. It's just about like what happened to them. They didn't develop in that way. They didn't have enough practice, right? So in these cases when words don't work, Dr. Perry recommends and he tells Oprah that you can go bounce a ball, like ask them to go take a walk or play catch, turn on music, kick a ball back and forth. And be very aware of your tone and your demeanor with these people because they need you to be present with them and repeat back using their own words. Don't make them tell you what they're thinking about or answer to you, like, why did you do that? He advises very strongly to let them be in control of what they need and when, and how much they talk, and when they bring up their problems. So just you being available, not pushy or prying, they'll feel it. And they'll start to consider it a safe place to express in their own way. And they'll naturally be capable of discussion as they have just repeated calm therapeutic doses with you being a safe place. And being sensitized, that overreactive state, right, is the opposite of regulation. So he reiterates that family and community and acceptance is what is healing. So try to get a network of people around them or you, if this is you, in order to heal. His most important point to this chapter is healing happens with many outlets in many different areas, like surrounded as often as you can by lots of different kind of supportive people. And I suggest gathering family, friends, getting together in social engagements often, or just having small little groups where you can really chat and be present with another person, because each person in your life has a different strength and a different purpose for you. One person can't be all things to all people. This is why single parents need more help. They can't do it all, right? It takes a community to raise and to influence us in a healthy way. And this day and age, disconnection and isolation are adding to the problem. Dr. Perry and Oprah kind of bring this chapter to a close with some facts about people. Anyone and everyone eventually excavates the reasons that they do what they do at some point in their life. Like, why do I do this thing? We start to question, and that meets us with resistance. But your past isn't your excuse. The past and your patterning is the insight to your answers. Why you behave and feel the way you do. It's about what happened to you. And one of my favorite parts of the chapter was what I have witnessed with my loved ones and my friends and how trauma influences our health. It's so unique to each person, and it's very hard to study because it's kind of disjointed and inconsistent. It's hard for doctors to detect too, because in 2018, the CDC was kind of grappling to understand the basics of heart, lung, brain, thinking, environment, culture, family line, etc., as it relates to trauma. Once trauma happens, as it does to all of us, especially those who are not functioning after its effects, like, how do you study that? And how do you not keep traumatizing them? Because people, even us, like, are marginalized because of it, excluded, minimized, shamed, even if only in their mind and in their personal reality. This could just be all perceived, right? To the brain, all of it's trauma. He goes on to explain their behaviors, their desperation, and their reactions just get misunderstood because of the outward appearance of it. They don't have any imminent threat, and people are wondering, what is this all about? Where did this even come from? But it's all about how dysregulated you have become inside over time. Overactive and overreactive responses to situations, we get frustrated, it's just right on the cuff. And from there, whoever it is that's doing this, like having this struggle with this, is not able to learn. They're not able to adapt. They end up falling behind in life and not progressing. And they're told they're not normal. A lot of these kids, and even adults, to get these labels, they're medicated. They're forced to conform like to some idealistic version of normal. They're delayed in some skills because they needed to survive at first. And the first and foremost, the brain wants to survive. And now it becomes a problem when you hang on to it for the rest of your life, and it keeps you from progressing. Dr. Perry is very passionate about how for children there's this toxic mismatch between abilities and the educational system. He talked about how kids try to regulate with predictable things like rocking in class. You know, they're rocking back and forth on their chair, they're tapping, they're humming. But when they do it, they're told it's disruptive and they get punished for it. And then that excludes them in everyone else's mind, which drastically adds to the problem. So out of embarrassment, they refuse to go to class to avoid humiliation. And so they avoid it and they run and they don't comply. And maybe they stop going to class and that turns into truancy issues. And then they run when they get caught and they're expelled. Or when they're found, they're restrained. So they fight and then charges get pressed. It's just all the brain's way of trying to keep itself safe. They're not able to regulate and get back to a place of feeling safe, and they're misunderstood. But if we create a safe place and accept them and help them be calm, that would be ideal, right? But they're spoken to as though they're dumb. They're treated like they're slow, like, you know, what's wrong with you? Like the title of the book is like, what happened to you instead? But they're told they're not normal. And by the reactions of everyone around them and the looks they get from everyone around them, they just feel even worse. He was saying that 30 to 50% of the kids nowadays have adverse experiences. And those adverse experiences get activated in classroom settings with the pressure of the teachers and the eyes of the peers, and it triggers threat, which brings about all that avoidance. At all costs, like they'll do anything to get out of it. They lash out and they don't even understand themselves and why they're doing it. Like they're like, what's going on? Why do I even feel this way? If you were to really talk to them, they don't know what's going on. They're just being set off. But why can't they be like the other kids? They're marginalizing themselves in their mind, telling themselves they're not good enough either with their own beliefs and their own identities. So in our lives when we were young, like chapters 1-5 talked about our first neglect or that first unwanted treatment, right? It sets the filters through which we see all other experiences in our life through. Even when it's not currently the case anymore, our brains still associate everything with it and still react from it. Chapter 8 goes on to talk about our brains and our bias and our systems. And that's just basically like our beliefs and our values that are in the higher brain in the cortex. The behavior part is in the lower brain. And this might be really dry to some people, but it's just about how a major part of life and what we see, think, and feel is influenced by parents, friends, and teachers and how they act. It's not what you say. What you do has a stronger impact, not what you say. And I'll plug in here that we even do this to ourselves. We say we're going to do one thing and then we totally find a lot of excuses and we don't. But it damages them when we say it to them, but it also damages us when we don't do what we're going to say. It's best just not to say anything than promise emptiness and create the feeling of not being worth it for them to put down their phone or to make the time or to follow through like they said they would. It is most damaging. Dr. Perry recommends how to change this is by getting to know the qualities of someone, not just the words and conversations, to actually have experiences and to create a bunch of different layers of a bunch of different ways of doing things, like experiences in different cultures, learning something that you've never learned before. to minimize living in a bubble, because when we control our environment too much and we start to live in a bubble, then we're unable to adapt to what's outside around us. So he recommends just change all these biases that our brains have and that we've been taught by just getting to know so many qualities of so many different humans. And chapter 9 is, it's called Relational Hunger in the Modern World. That's a long title, but they talk about how hunger for real relationships is rapidly growing and people are starving for affection and attention, and how measurable it has been in the world. We're a tribe species by nature, and we all need to be together, eating together, singing together, storytelling, laughing, knowing who we are by interaction, knowing who we are for our sakes and for their sakes. It lessens depression, it lessens insomnia, suffering, drug use, it heals trauma. He talks about how problems are all interconnected and that the medicine and Western culture tries to separate it all out. You've got an eye doctor and a bone doctor and a digestive doctor, and it's just missing the big picture. It's missing the true essence of the root of the problem because it's chasing and masking all the symptoms. All the pain, distress, and dysfunction come from disconnection. Disconnection, not belonging, not mattering, and on and on. He reiterates how healing comes from kinship and family connection. All ancient tribal healing practices that he has studied involve many people with all different strengths, all different stories, family, community, and they all form this identity, and they honor their ancestry, and they're in a more natural world, and they're thriving. So he reiterates how distressed and dysfunctional we are because we keep trying to separate it and isolate it and fragment it when it's all the same thing. Now, he advocates addressing health through how people have relationships, including our thoughts with ourselves and our relationship with ourselves, our behavior, and how we view others. So if you're hypervigilant, you can be diagnosed with ADHD. And then you feel marginalized by the system because of, I don't know, people have seemingly immature and impulsive behaviors, right? That doesn't promote healing or improve the pace of development in a person. Just because you're hypervigilant, you're diagnosed, and now you have a label, and then you feel marginalized by the label, and then the system just thinks you're immature and impulsive, and that actually does the opposite of promoting healing. It's counterproductive. It leaves us or them or whoever's struggling to just give into it because now you've attached a belief to what you were told. And Dr. Perry proves that poverty in relationships is so common nowadays, and that people who need the healing most are the ones that are getting cut off or cutting themselves off, which is just increasing the trauma and reinforcing and speeding up the addition of more issues and more poor health. I'm the biggest nerd, you guys. You probably know this by now because here I am loving every little detail of this, and you might be falling asleep again. It doesn't matter if the parents progress, their children kind of catch it, it's contagious, or the children who start to progress, and then the parents kind of catch it. It's found in connectedness. That's why I became a coach. I had poor narratives and poor stories in this area that would have never allowed me to have any deep connection or presence. I was a people pleaser. I super walked on eggshells. I wanted everybody to be happy and do everything for everyone, and I was burning out. But the connection and presence that I needed to heal my own trauma came through coaching. I didn't expect that once I did it, others would join me in the process. To my surprise, it is contagious, and I didn't know that before. I think it's amazing to be fully present and supportive of each other, just as we are, not needing anything to change or anybody to be fixed, through whatever we have experienced and whatever needs healing. That's where the healing power lies. No punishments are needed to get the behavior we ultimately want. Nobody has to force each other to do anything. We can reach and retrain the brain just by making time for connected moments. Regular, connected, authentic moments. Oprah said, as long as there is repair, we all gain resilience. So that means let's fight, let's argue, let's have differing opinions, right? That's possibly one of my favorite lines in this whole book. And I know I have a lot of them, but she says, again, I'll say it, as long as there is repair, we all gain resilience. I know in my course, I teach the art of reconciliation. Every problem can melt away by getting good at this. It's proven itself every single time with everyone I've worked with. If you need proof, just book a free strategy plan with me. Go to lifecoachalisa.com and you'll get instant information while we're talking towards the specific area you struggle or person. I've helped so many people who are so grateful that they know how to do this now. We pull apart their stories and their narratives, and we find the root causes, and we see what you would like to do from there once you see it and once you know why. So don't quit or give up on anyone, and don't walk away from any situation completely. We all need to develop better listening, better understanding, and better self-regulating skills. Families sometimes avoid each other because of how much they hate fighting. No more dinners around the table, everyone's in their own rooms. One of my friends introduced me to this concept of vacations just being a really expensive argument. But I didn't know at the time that is what is necessary for us to learn and practice. Practice seeing another person's perspective, not disagreeing with it to the point you're going to throw punches. It deepens love and connection to get to know them better. And not make it a bad thing that we're different. It's okay to be different. When we approach our differences of opinion with an empathetic stance, we are the ones that gain more regulation. Did you hear that? When we approach our differences with someone, differences of opinion, right, from an empathetic stance, we are the ones that gain more regulation. It's in allowing and accepting the way we talk, our response to truly hearing them, and not forcing your way or trying to convince them your way, forcing anything back on them. What happens to you matters. Every little thing matters, which means what you're doing to them matters. What you're saying to them matters. Dr. Perry said this really profound statement. The best indicator of health is your current relational health. So your physical health right now could be good, but your current relational health, if it's poor, that predicts upcoming issues in your health. Isn't that interesting? He goes on to explain that modern life has less social interactions, and in that, there are less vital relational resilience and conversational practices happening. Say two people get together and one's a people pleaser. You're not met with any resistance. Say families get together less often. Well, now there's less chance of having opposing ways of doing things to start those arguments. So the state of not being challenged creates our lack of development. It fails. It fails simply by not having the challenging experiences that we need as humans to grow. I say bring on the fights. They have a purpose. We become emotionally less fluent in that language, less fluent in the emotional language, less empathetic, less tolerant, because we're more sheltered. And our health decreases over time because of this, you guys. All of it's related to our connectedness and our sense of belonging. But belonging in differing opinions is what's important. That's where we need to get to learn and understand more. And I loved this because not getting our way is so upsetting, right? Walking on eggshells for someone else to stay unharmed. Unharmed by what? Unharmed by their own poor reactions? It even just sounds silly. But challenges to our way of thinking has such a profound purpose in our growth. Our light literally grows dim without challenges. We must be challenged. We got to get the gains for that light to stay burning strong. You have to get some practice in there. I could do a whole podcast on that. I should just stop and keep going on with my review here. But next week, the last chapter is what we need now. And I've already kind of hit on it because I just went off on a tangent. But I'll talk to you again next week or on a call or on a class, depending on what you've signed up for and how I know you. And bye.